Hey guys, and welcome to another Schematics update. This episode is about Parkitect. Finally, we tried to do an episode about Parkitect for years. This time we've got another special guest, first time on the show, Ruble Trillions. Ta-da! Could you please introduce yourself for listeners out there who don't know who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Ruble Trillions. I play creative games on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter as well, at Ruble_Trillions. So that's pretty much what I'm known for.
Cool. And as usual, I'm joined by BlindIRL, Fog, and this time Rudy as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be really quick, but just for people who don't know what Parkitect is, Parkitect was originally a two-man project. They've since taken on a few more members for the team. It was originally kickstarted back in 2014, if my memory serves me correctly. Almost exactly 1 year later, right when they said they would put out a playable version, they released it onto Humble. After sitting on Humble for I think it was 8 months. It wasn't that long. They went into early access on Steam for very positive reviews. They took on several other members to the team. They brought on a Shell in the Pit to do music. Eventually, they started to recruit some modders from the modding community known as Parkitect Nexus, which they have no affiliation with. It's just a fan site, essentially, that kind of bubbled up next to it. But yeah, it's just kind of progressed slowly in early access. It's a very small team. It's been around for a couple of years now. I think the biggest surge in popularity that I remember it having was around the time that Roller Coaster Tycoon World dropped, and nobody liked that.
Just a note, we should definitely do an Roller Coaster Tycoon World episode someday.
No, that game set my computer on fire.
How about start of April?
So the first real topic is Ruble.
Yeah, so the thing that I wanted to highlight was in, I think it was a couple months ago, in their Devlog 165, which Adfo or whoever is going to be hosting the video, you should put a link in the description to their Devlog on Tumblr, because they do a really good job of communicating their process, communicating where they are in development of the game. And one of those Devlogs, they highlighted Peep scenery interaction, and for like Blind highlighted, for a development team of a couple people, what they've been able to accomplish is pretty unbelievable. So the way that their game works, and this kind of bridges the gap between management and the aesthetic of the game, but what they're able to do is basically every piece of scenery in the game has the ability to be viewed by the peeps. And all of that plays an aspect into how much they enjoy your park. You can hide backstage things as another example, because that's undesirable to the peeps. So you can hide it with scenery. You can put it inside of buildings. Or if you just want to make your park look really nice, the peeps will take note of that, and it will impact their happiness in the game.
One thing that's really, really cool is how you mentioned the backstage stuff. Right from the get-go, this was actually an announced feature. That guests wouldn't like seeing things like backstage. That was one of the original announced features, and people were saying, "Oh, it's like, is this a thing yet?" And they're like, no, not yet." So it did take a while for them to. It's really, really cool to like actually have a gameplay reason to try and make things look pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. To have it tied in, and the other thing too is if you go to that blog post, it's really interesting. There's one screen where they show you the actual sight lines of like every piece of scenery in the entire park, and it's crazy. Like they use a blue line to highlight that, and almost the entire park turns blue where there's a path near it. And that's what the peeps are taking in as they're walking through the park. And what's also impressive on top of that is that it doesn't, since that update's been implemented, I haven't really noticed any change in performance of the game. The fact that they have something that robust sort of running behind the scenes, again, is impressive. And, this game is, again, for the small dev team, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable what they've been able to accomplish.
Oh yes, it still runs on my 7.5 years old MacBook Pro. So, on full graphics with the update. That's amazing.
Which is another thing. Mac support as well.
Yes.
This might like fall back towards the history of Parkitect section, but it's kind of interesting actually how this project got going originally. It was just Sebastian, the coder, wanted to try and program roller coasters. And he put out a demo, and I'm going to dig and see if I can find it somewhere. There's a GIF of it, which was the original like wireframe roller coaster for Parkitect, and it is completely asset free, and it's just like essentially a line with a box on it, just kind of moving around a track, and it was just an attempt to see if you could program like isometric roller coaster physics, and then eventually thought, hey, maybe I actually have something here, and then started looking for an artist and encountered Garrett.
Was he like a fan of like Roller Coaster Tycoon? Is that what led to it, or was it just purely a test that he was trying to do?
Yeah, it was definitely partly that, you know, played the games when they were younger and whatnot. So later on, you're just like programming. It's like, I wonder if I can do this thing.
It does feel the experience and love of older games like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 has kind of influenced the project and the way that they've actually chose to design this, even starting off with the isometric view. It feels rather inspired by that, but obviously it has its own kind of aspect to it and its own kind of art style in a way.
I just have one point. I don't even know if anybody mentioned that already because it's a kind of personal thing, but I believe that older games, like with the limitations they had back then, they just had some more, you know, take-ons on creative ways to make the game more interesting, because there was not just this shiny graphics. Okay.
I was gonna say 100% agree. This is the reason I still play Roller Coaster Tycoon 2.
Yeah, and I think they kind of, you know, put themselves into this position by choosing like the view and the isometric view and you know the general art style, and they delivered an even better one in terms of what you can do, because like with the implementation of the stuff and with the delivery thing and also with the trash area and all that kind of stuff, right, makes it really interesting to play. And also now, as the newest update, as we have talked about with the like viewport of the guests and stuff, it kind of adds to it. And I really feel building and playing in the game that it has a totally different vibe to it, and I love it because it's just, you know, it's no it's a comparison, but it's not really a comparison to Planet Coaster, for example, because this is just a completely different game.
I want to go back to the point of the art style. Anyone wants to explain how the game looks?
Low poly.
Playmobil.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, low poly yet cool. It has something like a material design approach to it, I feel. Like, you know, what you can see in mobile devices nowadays is that they got rid of anything like shadows and depth and stuff like that. They just go back to the very, like, squares. Yeah, and it looks still kind of cool.
Reaching back in time to, I think it was the first interview I did with Garrett on my Twitch channel. I remember him saying that it's that way specifically because it's utilitarian. If you go to Garrett's like website, you can see all of his other work. He's done some incredibly highly detailed stuff. Like he's made some models that could be in Mass Effect and you wouldn't think twice about it. But because it's just him, it's just the one artist, and it takes them so long to animate and design every ride and research and make everything. It's very simple,
kind of cartoony,
like because that's necessary, because there was only 2 of them at the start, and I think that they nailed it. It looks adorable. I remember another thing that I mentioned during the original interview was that it reminds me of, like, when I was younger, I used to have these mats, and they would sit on the ground, and they would have like a scene on them, like a city, or a friend of mine had one that had like a fair on it. And then you'd have like little toys and you'd play on these like little carpet mats, right? Mm-hmm. And they were quite large. Like they'd fill up half of your playroom as a small kid, or half of your bedroom. And I mentioned that to Garrett, and he's like, well, that was part of their inspiration for like their original concept art. It's like, well, let's make this look like a toy, something that you could pick up and play with.
Yeah, a toy. That's a good visual example. Is that it's almost like a toy. You know, and the thing that I love about this game from a visual standpoint is going back to like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. they drastically expanded the amount of scenery options and building options available in that game versus 1, but it still fell short. And to me, with where Parkitect is visually, it's like everything I wanted those games to be. More variety, just the look and feel of it, and then the ability to really be as creative as you want to be. You can mix and match so many different things, very similar in that manner to Planet Coaster, where you can use pieces in ways they weren't intended to get a visual look that you're going for, but it has that same freedom, but also balances it out with a solid management game as well.
Yeah. Just to kind of continue on the idea of this almost being like a toy, they have built in a feature of tilt shift, which kind of could potentially say it goes above and beyond to kind of give you that immersion that you're almost overlooking all of this, and then being able to control it.
I've blown minds of several people watching my stream while playing this game, just like sitting in the isometric view and then tilting the camera down, and it's just like, whoa, like that's not how that's supposed to work. But
yeah, I think the art style is just beautiful. I just want to say that. I mean, it's even cooler now to hear that is kind of, again, a limitation which brought them to use this
about,
but it turned out to be exactly the thing they needed, right? I can't really imagine how it would look like if it is a more realistic approach. Like, for example, take Zoo Tycoon 2. It stayed kind of in this between thing. Like Zoo Tycoon 1 for this time looked really nice, also with the kind of more realistic approach to it. And then Zoo Tycoon 2 for me never, it never came to the same amount of level of detail, level of love which has been put into it. Not because the game was bad essentially, but because they tried to mix and match an art style which just didn't fit the look of the game. So it
that's early 3D, right?
Yeah, it was early, but still it wasn't into the realistic. It was more into the comic-y.
A lot of people come at me with like pitchforks, but that's the exact feeling I have about RCT3.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like from a point in time where it didn't age very well, and when I look at it now, it just looks muddy.
But what I wanted to say is, talking about limitations, segue, there are objects. Go on.
Segue. Yeah. Okay. So there are objects in the game, as pretty much as in Planet Coaster, which do stick to a grid, and there are objects that don't. So for the objects that stick to the grid, it's pretty much as you would expect it from Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2, and also like the grid of Planet Coaster, so pretty much as it is supposed to be. But then again, those that don't snap to the grid, they are freely movable in a way, but you can't really align them properly because they are always free. You can't really, you don't have an option to use a axis to move them along or whatsoever. But there is kind of a snap option for those grid pieces and also for other pieces if you put a certain toggle, but then again it would be snapping to the grid again. So what would be amazing is if you could at least try and snap together objects that are freely movable, so that at the end you at least can align them properly, because I tend to have some actual problems doing hedges properly because they were always like a tiny little bit off, and yeah, would be amazing to have like something that at least, and if it's just snapped to the end of the other one, that's fine. And yeah, additionally, it would be amazing if you can rotate those free pieces also horizontally or vertically. I don't really know which one I would have to say, but yeah, for example, the Chemnin, which normally has to go like vertically, but it would be amazing to use that one horizontally as well.
So some kind of maybe a line to surface, just to kind of compare it to a feature that we've seen in at least Planet Coaster. You can align to surface, or you can base it on that, and if there's like a full height wall, maybe there's a grid on just that individual section, and then you can use, I think it's Alt in game, you can use Alt to actually move up on that grid. that would be quite useful, because I'll admit that one of the first things that I tried to make when I first picked this up was Clock Tower, which gave me the issue that there wasn't really a vanilla Clock Tower piece, which meant I had to actually sink a few gears into the actual building so that trying to find a creative way around a problem that I found, but it would have been easier if we did have some kind of feature that did align to surface and give us that maybe functionality, I would say.
Talking of this, I think I can just put this point in here, because otherwise that would not fit that well. So also, what would be amazing to have kind of a... Oh, well, let's, the more I hate it in Planet Coaster that we have scenery pieces and building pieces, I still find it useful to understand which are grid pieces and which not. In Parkitect, though, I don't have any idea which are grid objects and which are not. From the menu-wise, I can't see that. So I always have to get it, plop it down to see if it's on the grid or not. So if there would be any little icon or whatsoever in the menu that tells me, dude, you can't use that freely, you have to put it on the grid, that'd be very helpful. I mean, like, you're always searching for certain pieces to use, and once you, for example, want to do something which is more in detail, where you need to move it in detail, you want to have a free moving piece. But if you just want to make your basic shape, you just want to have grid pieces. So that would be kind of helpful.
So I'm just gonna, like, sort of part of this topic. There's one tool that I think that this game does, like, quite literally perfectly. Well, actually two. The fence tool and the pathing tool. It hurt my brain a little bit the first time I played Parkitect, and I clicked to put down a fence and then just dragged, and fences appeared.
Oh, yes.
This is such a simple thing, and you don't think about it once you've played the game for like 5 minutes. But man, then you go back to, I don't know, Planet Coaster, Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, any of them, and you try and build a fence, and it's just like, why did they make me do this? And in this game, you just click, drag, done.
Yeah, and that fence dragging mechanic is so powerful. People have actually started trying to mod it into some of the other games that they feel it's missing from,
like RCT2.
The shockwave, it's something that is ever so subtle, but it really kind of gives you the idea of scale, at least. And that does come back to this idea of it being small scale toys kind of stuff. And it's such a simple effect that can give such a nice feel. I'm struggling to explain it. Like, how...
I know what you mean, and
it's like reinforcing the progress you're making. It's like a subtle cue that you're building in the park, and like it's coming together. I don't know. That's how it appeals to me.
I mean, you need to really experience it for yourself. I think no matter how hard we try to describe it, do it yourself. Buy the game and try it out yourself.
Yeah. But I just want to refer, because we're here, and Advo and Fog also know it. Like, when we talked about sounds with Matthew, you remember on the expo on Planet Coaster, he really said that as well. Like, it's so important to have like something satisfying about sounds while you place down objects. And I think with what he told back then absolutely holds true to Parkitect as well. And I'm pretty sure they do admire what they did with Parkitect as well, because it's as you said, it's so damn satisfying if you just plop down a thing. And also, not just because of the sound, I also love all the animations. For example, a flower pot. If you put down a flower pot, it's not just there, it just plops down.
Everything has a little bit of a jelly jiggle to it.
Yeah, that's it. It just plops, and then the little sphere of the greenish foliage thing just plops out of the pot, which is, it's just satisfying. And then you just want to plop down tons of them just to see this animation go like a domino effect. At least that's what I did.
I'll admit, I just did, yeah.
Well, I think my favorite animation in the entire game is when you build a drop tower. and you click on that little up and down arrow, and then it snaps upward, and it has like the most violent sound in existence that just goes whoop when you go to build it, and it just like kind of pops out of itself. It's just like you could just go up and down with that thing for a while, and it's just like, man, that is weirdly satisfying.
Yeah, and also
it's like a shake weight in a video game.
It's also the fact that there's particle effects coming off it as well. It just really gives it, really kind of gives the impression that this is just kind of coming out of thin air and just suddenly getting built.
Yeah, see, I think this is the kind of stuff where if you're just looking at photos of the game, you don't fully appreciate it, because, you know, there's just, if you just look at a photo of the game, you know, the aesthetic we like, I think it's the right play for their style that they're going for. But some people might be turned off to it because it's not, you know, the fancy graphics of Planet Coaster or something like that. But once you get in and you see all these animations as a part of the whole, you know, it really sells the game in a different way.
So, a possible slightly controversial opinion, I think. The design, at least what we see aesthetically, I think it's more almost as a support for how much of a push they're trying to do for management, UI, and the way that it feels to play and feels to manage, in a way that obviously it needs to look good, and it needs to actually get the correct information across. But when we're talking about building paths and we're building roller coasters, building rides, and talking about how great that it feels to actually make that, I almost feel like that comes down to the way that it plays more so than how it actually looks.
Yeah.
Is that kind of...
No, I would agree with that.
It feels strange to say. Like,
I think the way I interpret what you're saying is it goes back to the statement that I made earlier about how the graphics are very utilitarian. You know, they're minimal by design to make things clear and easy to understand, but at the same time, cute looking. Now, I would just like to mention a thing real quick, related to a topic I have listed here called Personal Reasons Why I Love the Sound in Parkitect. And so I live in Vancouver, or just outside of Vancouver, Canada. Garrett and Shell in the Pit, so their composer, and Garrett are from Vancouver as well. And their contracted audio team, a duo, they are also from Vancouver. So by result, a large number of the rides have audio recorded from local roller coasters. There's a pretty great picture of them on the wooden roller coaster in Vancouver with microphones, and it just says "doing work, working on the job." So it kind of hits home for that reason.
Absolutely.
and when that's your 9 to 5, you're doing something right.
I think we should move on, and I'm totally out of segues. So Rudy, take it away.
His Segway dealership finally went out of business.
Yeah, so maybe
Sedgway Drive,
Vancouver. I don't know if Vancouver just has straight paths, but maybe that's a tech. Okay, that was literally the worst one ever. I won the unsmooth segways challenge.
That was a very cheap one. That not smooth.
Well, you know the diagonal roof pieces, you can make them the same color as the pathway and stick them on the ground.
Yes, I know, but it would be nice if that's a thing that could be usable. So I just was wondering if you kind of have the chance in the future to have a diagonal path. Like as you said, there are already pieces in that are diagonal, so yeah. Also people move like that, so it could be, and also coasters move like that, so it would add a little bit more of, a tiny little bit more of different orientations to it. It's not a huge thing, so to say, because as you said, you can just make this also again with a little bit of workaround. But yeah, it would be nice to have it as an actual thing, so that people actually
even if they just those flat pieces you mentioned, even if they just put flat pieces in that were the same texture as the path pieces, that might be functionally easier to implement, because that's what I've done, exactly what you said. I'll color like a piece a light gray to match the concrete look of some of the path pieces, but then you're limited to just kind of using that one path piece, where if you want some of the cobblestones or the wood or something like that, you don't have that flexibility to go diagonally with those. So if it's functionally difficult to actually make the path, then something like that would be an acceptable alternative in my mind, I think.
Besides, if Parkitect was based solely on Vancouver, then it would just be one gigantic parking lot that you'd plop rides down in.
But then Uthras would have been a developer as well.
There are places
No.
There are places in Playland where you just like look down and you're like, man, there's a parking space here. There's a ride here.
I'm a little bit salty. I was the first one that built a great parking lot in the game. And nobody gives a fuck about it.
Uthras just went and did it
anymore. It's just
funny how he's just
fuck you, Uthras.
What he's done a lot of other stuff that's amazing, but he's known as the Parkitect guy.
Yeah, bullshit.
Or the parking lot guy. Yeah.
But Advo is the monorail guy, so never mind.
Advo wants to be the parking lot guy. His legacy was taken from him.
Exactly. I was the parking lot guy. I was the monorail guy. I was the rapid rivers guy. Fuck y'all. I'm out here, bitches.
Now you're just like you're just the respectable editor of Schematics. Yeah.
And our wonderful guest, Ruble Trillions, is France guy.
Yeah, that's true. I am known as that. That's true.
Anyways, we have a lot of foliage and way more foliage than Plant Coaster, but there is an issue.
Yeah, so it's similar to what Rudy was talking about with the building pieces. Some are free placeable, some are not. So I feel like they could maybe kill two birds with one stone there and just, make everything free placeable. I know that creates an issue with some of the grid-based stuff, but especially with plants, I think, maybe I get it more with the building pieces like walls and things like that, but for plants especially, just allowing it to be placed anywhere you want would be really helpful.
I totally agree.
I kind of feel it's not really an issue because you can resize the grid.
There is a button that you can hold down to make the grid quarter size. You can also paint the squares at quarter size.
It's the way that it seems to work at the moment is using your numbers along the top of your keyboard. You can actually choose how big the individual squares are going to be. For example, you can have one square, you can have a 2x2, a 3x3, 4x4, 5, 6, 7, and it goes to potentially,
I think 9, right?
A close level. Yeah, it goes up to 9, which then is essentially some form of free place.
Now, again, it's been a while for me since I've really gotten into the game, but I know one early issue, which I had actually downloaded a mod for, was like a no collision for the scenery. So you could, sink trees into the ground and use them as bushes, things like that. Has that been functionally implemented in the base game?
It is kind of in. It's you can some things you can sink in, but not everything. Like that's literally the first thing I did. I wanted to know if I could sink in the rocks, and I could.
If it's not functional, that should be. Because
after a little bit of testing, it is possible. Sweet. Trees can be sunk further down.
All right, problem solved.
Cool, good job, guys.
Next thing is mentioning building UI, and I just want to real quick hats off because when the game first came out into early access, before this original Steam early access. I'm talking the early access, the earliest access of when it came on to Humble. Yeah, I always like to check a look. When it was originally launched onto Humble, man, that UI was barely usable. It was functional, and that's being really nice to it originally. And it's still a little, you know, there's a few places where I look at the UI and I'm like, really? But in general, the UI has gotten a lot better, and that makes me so happy.
Yeah, I just want to praise one thing, and that's the pipette. This thing is so damn useful, like really useful. I would wish to have it in every game now. Like it's kind of similar to the undo thing, which we don't talk too much about, I guess, but you know, that's something you don't miss if you don't know that it is actually so helpful. And it's even contextual, which I love. Like, you know, you're in the painting thing, you can grab the paint or just the colors of it, but if you're in the building menu, you can grab the piece, literally. So what I did is, and this is mentioning the earlier issue of not knowing which is a freely placeable thing and which not, I just plopped down all the free things I used and all the grid pieces I used in different areas, and I just hit the P button all the time to grab those pieces again. So that made the workflow a lot quicker. So I just want to say thank you for the pipette. That's just a brilliant thing.
Another thing that just came into my mind, what I really love is the opportunity, the possibility, I mean,
yes,
to save color schemes. I wished we had that in Planet Coaster as well.
I was going to say, there's another tool I wish that we had in Planet Coaster, which is the teardrop tool. But we kind of have that sort of.
Yeah.
Because you can just like click on pieces and like save colors.
There is some kind of workflow to save some kind of color scheme. It would be a little bit particular, but what you could do is you could always take all of those codes down of the colors that you want to use, and then always copy paste those into other boxes or copy paste that into a document for later. It's not ideal, it's not optimal, but it is a way to get the same color every time.
Oh, I've also seen people putting that on signs. Like, you know, using signs, putting the text in and using it later again.
Talking about clever ideas, and another thing I wished we had in Planet Coaster is resizable objects.
I think that summarized everything.
Okay.
Move on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening. Bye.
I mean, rebuilding, like resizing objects is incredible because you can take the same rock and make like 50 other rocks. Like, what? There's really nothing to say. It's
my
just
favorite part of the rock resizing is it makes making like a cliff face so easy, because you make a couple of them really big and then you mix in some smaller pieces here or there, and you get that look of a giant cliff versus, you know, in something like Planet Coaster, you either have to try to accomplish it with the terrain tool and a blend of rocks, but you're probably going to use a lot more rocks than you would like to. So it's nice from that standpoint of just, you know, you can knock out a big swath of land that you're trying to landscape pretty easily with that.
You can make a roller coaster in Parkitect look like a terrain coaster in about 15 seconds with like with 3 different shapes of rocks. Just make them really large and just place them underneath the supports and bam, 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 done.
Yeah, to be fair,
it's beautiful.
The way the game is designed makes this a lot easier to implement than in any other game. But this shouldn't be a thing to make it less amazing than it is, because it is just amazing. I also love it for foliage, like the cacti, I believe. It's, I guess, for me already the most used piece in the game, because this is one thing you can place everywhere without any check for collision. So, and this is also resizable. The little cacti, there are kind of 10 different cacti things.
Yeah.
Cacti, yeah.
Oh, cacti. Oh,
I didn't even know how to say that one. Or the aloe vera, aloe whatever. Yeah.
Aloe vera. Or...
I mean aloe vera.
Aloe vera. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This next time on English lessons with schematics. It's fine.
I've got a camel hoof in my mouth. I'm so sorry.
You don't want me to speak German.
Yeah. But you know, to kind of touch on what you said, Rudy, that you know it's not necessarily something that'll be easy to implement in Planet Coaster. I think that's the same. It works both ways for both games. So there's things that you know could never be possible in Parkitect that we see in Planet Coaster and vice versa. And so the thing that anytime I talk to somebody about either game, you know, I always encourage people to buy both because they really are a completely different experience. You know, a lot of people might have been turned off to Parkitect that own Planet Coaster because, you know, they think I've got a theme park game. What do I need another one for? If that's you and you're listening to this, I would encourage you just to buy it because it's an amazing game. They've done an incredible job with the resources that they have. I mean, it's incredibly impressive what they've done. And it's just a fun game to play.
I would say, not to make it about myself, but just as a statistic, let's say, I didn't have this game prior to Planet Coaster. Now, disclosure, I've been playing this game for about two days, and the experience that I've got so far has been different enough to make me think I need both of these games. This Planet Coaster is really good for the hyper detail. I'm going to spend 3 hours making a house. Whereas this... Also, I understand that they do have management features coming to Planet Coaster. But it does feel that Parkitect has been more grounded around these management routes.
Although, I must say, I also spent 3 hours on one house in Parkitect already.
Oh, yeah, I spent about 70 minutes. But it does...
Yeah, I can see that, totally.
It's very kind of... satisfying to work in both games because they're different aesthetics, different art styles.
Yeah, but I totally see your point. I mean, it's absolutely like both games, as I said earlier in this recording, is like you can't really compare them because they're different games. And as you said, I basically think also that the management aspect of Parkitect will get a lot more important once they really have the scenario and career mode in. Parkitect
already has a better base for management. As a video game already, all it needs is balancing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Planet Coaster is you could say and I think argue justifiably that it's more of a creative tool than it is a video game. And this is absolutely a video game.
Yeah, it's a sandbox first.
Yeah, I think the point is, and this is again connecting to what I said earlier with the older games, your imagination helps tons when it comes to this kind of base game in terms of management, because they can get a lot more crazy in terms of all the different kind of things. Let's start, for example, with the stuff management. Like you have the stuff building, you have the delivery area, and they have to bring stuff over to every shop, right? I mean, they're literally just bringing boxes, which is fine because from the graphics and the whole standpoint of the game, it's just enough to make it look great. But if you take this on to another game, it doesn't really work that well, because then you have to think about, okay, what is he carrying in that box? For which shop? You know? And this is why I love this kind of games with this kind of limitations to it, because your imagination fills the gaps you can't display.
Yeah. I will admit, I've been waiting for a theme park game to hit certain notes with me, as far as we have all these shops. Where do the actual stock, where does the actual items to make this run come from? And Parkitects have justified that in a way that is actually interesting from a management aspect.
This is going to be a kind of silly comparison, but I think of a game like Stardew Valley, where all of the aspects in the game build on one another. So, you know, you have to, you know, mine for resources to help with your farm, and, you know, you need farming things to help with, you know, money to buy stuff for mining, and, you know, all of it's interconnected. And I think there's something really satisfying about playing a game like that. And I think thus far, Parkitect has been able to do that pretty well. I mean, so many of those things are intertwined with one another, you know, like you just said, with delivering things to various shops. And, there's multiple ways you can do it. You can hire staff, but it takes longer and it's less expensive. But they also have implemented a sort of conveyor system, which is more expensive, but, allows things to happen much faster. And then, Rudy, you mentioned the aspect of, even though it's a pretty solid management game already, the creative aspect is there as well. And what's great, like we talked about earlier in the episode, is the fact that the peeps actually react to the scenery. So even if you're more of a creative type person, your creativity is being rewarded practically in the game.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, the funny thing is, when I started building, actually I played the game a few months ago already, a little bit, but actually in depth I started 2 weeks ago, I guess. And now this week in university, I really jumped deep into it. And actually, I didn't know about that feature being added, like with the viewports of people, and that they take care of what you see and whatnot. And I started building and putting the stuff underground, like the stuff roads underground, and just have some little tunnels coming off the ground on various positions in the park, which I could hide pretty neatly. So that was so cool to be rewarded for this effort. I was like, really, I didn't know that, and I was just rewarded for being, in this terms, creative enough to make myself up to the work to bring this all like underground. And
yeah, there's something so satisfying. I don't care what game you're playing, when you intuitively go to do something and it actually is a part of the game. I don't know about you guys, but any game I'm playing that has that aspect of it, I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's kind of like the aspect of thinking there might be an Easter egg or hidden loot down this direction, and then there is. You didn't need any kind of signpost to say, go check here, there's good loot here. You kind of worked your way to that conclusion from either experiences prior to that, or even in the game, or even gaming in general. And that kind of feeling of not being told how to feel, but then having that result is, yeah, as you say, very satisfying.
Another thing that is very satisfying is if you have an idea for objects that aren't in the game. If you have mod support.
That's just the beauty of Unity, though, because this Parkitect runs in Unity.
Say
right?
Thank you for the nice segue, or applaud me and anything.
I mean, the purpose of a segue is you're not supposed to say shit.
Here.
You just keep moving,
yeah,
okay?
It's
now you had to go and ruin it.
You're ruining my immersion
not.
Right
it's
now.
your thing and it's wrong. And
That was an A+. Segue. That was for sure.
Thank you, Ruble. You can come again.
Segue is
Blind,
so good,
you're
you
out.
Man. Anyway, the nice thing about it running in Unity is you can just go download Unity and start like putting things in the game. Quite literally, like it's free. Go get Unity, start making assets. Like if you suddenly have an inkling that you want to make assets for Parkitect, you can just kind of do that. And around the existence of Parkitect, there's a website called Parkitect Nexus, which I think I mentioned earlier, which is not affiliated with the developers at all, but it's just a hub for modding Parkitect, and it's kind of an awesome thing for such a small and young game to just have this community already, which is relatively active. Even currently, there's usually 20 to 100 people actively staring at that website, and that's quite a lot for what it is.
As you mentioned, this website was set up by the community outside of the knowledge of the actual game creators. And let's be honest, that's kind of flat. They should hopefully be flattered by that people are passionate about your game so much that they will go out of the way to make something around your game. And
well, it's interesting. If you go onto Parkitect Nexus now and you go back to the beginning and you look at it, there are objects in the mods section of Parkitect Nexus that are now just fully in the game and have been for a long time because the developers just reached out to the modders and purchased the assets from them. They've embraced the modding community to a point where they've actually let them help them develop the game to an extent.
I agree, and I think that modding, and I keep telling you that I think that modding keeps a game alive, even if you're done, in air quotes, developing it and only supporting it as patches. But yeah.
I kind of just wanted to mention, while we were talking, I was just skipping through this website you just mentioned, and I just found out that there is actually a set for those paths to make them look nicer.
Parkitect does have a very small player base. Like, just taking a quick glance at Steam charts, just note that this isn't 100% accurate, but you know, they have a peak players of about 60 to 70 every month, basically all year. Like, since January of this year, they've had an average of about 60 to 70 players peak per month, with an average player base of 25 players per hour. So it's a small game, but it's consistent, you know, and it's nice to see it continuing to just kind of putz along and do its thing quietly without really, you know, shrinking in any way. Like, there is a community for Parkitect, and I hope to see it grow.
Bad hearing the numbers. Are you okay?
That's not even me.
Are you dying over there?
That's not even me.
Oh, okay.
So I'm totally fine.
Then I don't
worry.
care.
Thanks for asking.
As long as you're not dying while recording, I'm totally cool with it. I'm kind of feel bad hearing the numbers of active players, because it's such a lovely game, and
you can see the drop off when
I know, and that's what makes me feel bad, because I actively I had a game quite a long time, and I played a little bit before early access on Steam. But I really started to play the game on early access Steam, and yeah, sad thing. I think a week after that, Coaster came out, and that's I felt like that.
No, it wasn't quite that, but I mean, it came out in early access on Steam around the same time Planet Coaster went into alpha. So Planet Coaster didn't really, I think, cannibalize its success at all. I think there's a noticeable drop-off in November 2016 when Planet Coaster comes out. It goes from 130 average-ish players per month down to about 70. And it's sat there ever since. And, you know, that's...
No, what I was trying to say, I feel bad because I abandoned Parkitect for Planet Coaster and never came back in a way I wanted to come back to the game. Because Planet Coaster takes up so much time, and I know I would love to play Parkitect, and it would play hundreds and hundreds of hours, but I simply don't have the time. I kind of feel like I was 15 again.
Well, for me, I do have to say, this is very special about Planet Coaster. It's like the one and only game that can compare to Minecraft for me, which is the other game I tend to play tons of hours in, with the fact that I just ignored every other game out there. And afterwards, I was kind of feeling good because I could switch games again. But then Planet Coaster came and stopped that again. But I have to say that alongside some other nice alpha games I enjoyed recently, Parkitect is one of the single games I do really see it has a future. Maybe not for me playing it as massively or as in-depth as Planet Coaster, but I guess there will be a lot of other persons and people and
I think that Parkitect will
play that
gain
game.
An audience once it's finished. Because basically everybody I've talked to who isn't just somebody like us who just wants to sit there and meticulously build a building for 3 hours, says, I want a campaign. You know, like they have a scenario editor.
What I said.
But you mentioned this earlier, Rudy. Like, once it has a finished campaign, and every time I've talked to them, they're aiming for relatively soon to have that done. Earlier this year, they said beginning of 2018 or end of 2017 is when they wanted to have something like that mostly done. So, you know, they're working on a campaign, and I'm hoping that it's substantial. I'm hoping that the management is challenging and fun. I think it will be. They have all the mechanics there. They just need to get the numbers tuned correctly. And if they can get a good launch, I genuinely think that Parkitect is going to end up in kind of the theme park lineage as a positive. You know, if you go back, you know, we've got the granddaddies of like Theme Park and RCT1 and RCT2, and then the controversial divisive RCT3, followed by the mobile games and the other game that I won't mention. Although RCT World, oddly enough, going into early access, I think sold more copies of Parkitect than Parkitect had up until that point. There's quite a funny graph. The day that RCT World launches into early access, there's this huge spike in sales. It's quite a lot, actually.
I'll admit, so as a game consumer, I'm a little bit picky on the games that I have bought in the past. I've not really been too into the idea of early access. I think I'm getting better on that, because I think I've got at least 3 titles I've bought in, including Parkitect, which have been in early access, and I don't know whether it's changing my opinion, because I'm excited to see this evolve now. I'm excited to follow the process. I'm excited to see this grow and flourish and get a little bit of nostalgia from people saying, oh, this feature's really cool, why don't we have it? And then I think back and on the time that we're talking about now and think, yeah, we never had that, but I'm glad we do now.
Quite honestly, I feel this is kind of the toilet game. I can be the kind of toilet game, right? I mean,
yeah, I'm not sure if you're
jump into it, and
it's a bit jarring from the comments. It's a bit jarring from the compliment that I was just paying to. It's like, this is great when you're taking a.
I don't know about you, Rudy, but I don't think you should be jumping into a toilet.
That's not the toilet game, mate. No, the point is, you know, who doesn't know that? You know, back in the days, we tend to read the backside of the products we can find on the toilet when we didn't have the smartphones. Everybody did this, and we were literally experts on the ingredients of shampoo, like experts. And the thing about
that's the most German thing I've ever heard.
The ingredients of shampoo on the back?
That you would know that.
I mean, I used to read the ingredients of shampoo while I was taking baths when I was like 7, but... You know.
I got your back, Rudy.
The point I was making is that it is a game where you can jump in and play for like half an hour, and you can do shit, you know? You can do stuff. You can make a scenario work and stuff. And I don't feel that Planet Coaster ever, for example, will get that game, even though they will have a nice scenario editor and nice, you know... But it will always be more time intensive than a game like Parkitect is. This is really the kind of game which is down to the point and click and point game mechanics, right? And I think that will help.
I think I thought of a way to describe what you're trying to say that sounds a little bit more flattering, and that the game respects your time.
That sounds way better than the toilet game, yeah. Yeah.
But flattering in the context of toilet is also pretty neat.
I don't know about you. I try to get out of the toilet as quickly as possible. Anyway.
We have desktops. We don't have a MacBook to play this on.
I'm so sorry.
It's just this weird feeling of, I want this game to be successful. I want to see this game grow. I want it... I just...
You want to share it, almost.
Yeah. Like, I love Parkitect, and I want to see Parkitect grow and continue to...
Yeah, I can definitely share that opinion with you. I mean, the game has not just a little bit of potential, it has huge potential. And, you know, someday there has to be a successor to Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2. Because, people still love these games. People still love these kind of oldish isometric view games. They will ever... you know, have their audience, and I believe that this can really be a hit for, as I said, a game which is more in between. And, you know, I believe that this is management based. It will also reach people that are not as much theme park enthusiasts, but more like, you know, the airport CEO kind of genre fans. But therefore it has to be a challenging career mode, for example. I think it's a lot which has to be to do with that one.
Yeah, and for me to kind of close my last statement on the episode here would just be, again, to tell people, like, if you have Planet Coaster and don't have this game, it's different enough. It's a completely different experience. There's room in your library for 2 theme park games. You will not regret buying it. I can tell you that much.
I mean, well, technically there's room for like 4, RCT1, RCT2, Parkitect, and Planet. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. So I think before we fall into another toilet comparison, let's wrap this up real quick. For our listeners, thank you for listening. Ruble, thank you for being guest on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It was awesome.
Thank you. And for our listeners, as always, if you have any comments, suggestions, shit posting, oh fuck, there's the toilet again.
Move on. Enough with the toilets.
Shit posting.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was forced or not. I don't know which is bad.
Anyway, for general suggestions, comments, whatever it is, we have a comment section, as you may know, posted. Thanks, Ruble, for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was awesome.
Yeah. And for our listeners, thank you for listening, watching, whatever you do. If you have any comments, suggestions, whatever it is, we have a comment section down below. Feel free to post anything you want. No, not anything, but you know what I mean. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
See ya. Can I hit stop on the record?
Yeah, stop.